So the propaganda against Muslims, coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Common Sense Logical Reason. As always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So I'm a huge fan of Candace Owens, or Candace Farmer now. Again, I've been a fan of hers ever since she came out. She was always a breath of fresh air. You know, more of what we need. People who are going to just tell people the truth they need to hear, especially to black people. And that's essentially what she does. She just speaks the raw truth to people who need to hear it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of her, because people who does that, I'm going to resonate with them, because I resonate with the facts, evidence, and the truth. And the reason why she's so hated among so many blacks is because that's exactly what she does. And unfortunately with black people, there's too many black people in this country who label telling blacks the truth that they need to hear as tearing them down, quote unquote. But now, I don't agree with her 100% of the time. You're not going to agree with anyone 100% of the time. Now, she spoke on the propaganda against Muslims after 9/11.
9/11, I think about it now, the propaganda to make me afraid of Muslims. I can't even imagine being a Muslim growing up after 9/11 in America, because I know how I felt about them. And I was young, I was 11 years old. But that beating every day in our heads that every Muslim was a terrorist was the idea that you got. It is so unacceptable. When I go back and I re-examine that propaganda, that brainwashing that took place in the classroom to make me scared of something I didn't even know what a Muslim was. I remember going to the airport and someone was a Hindu and I was scared of it. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna make him take this off of his head, blah, blah. I thought that was a Muslim. Should be assessed as whether or not they were crimes against humanity. We bombed 1 million Iraqi civilians. We killed 1 million Iraqi civilians. What were we doing in Iraq?
Now, I will say that it's not all the Muslims. I will agree 100% that it's not all Muslims. It's the Muslim extremists that are ones that create the problem. And these are the ones that basically create the problem and give all Muslims a bad name. But here's the problem, though, is that they do give all Muslims a bad name. And it's kind of like the snake analogy that Thomas Sotomayor uses all the time. You know, all snakes aren't poisonous. And I would add that, you know, all snakes aren't constrictive. Matter of fact, most snakes are. But I'm not going to sit here and play around with snakes to determine who's the constrictors or who are poisonous. I mean, like, I'm not going to, deal with snakes to try to figure out the ones who are dangerous or not. I'm just going to avoid all the snakes. And it's the same thing, it's kind of what I always say with blacks. These blacks they all want to support thug and be thug. You have these kids in the suburb and they want to act like the thugs, be like the thugs, look like the thugs, go where the thugs go. Well, because that lifestyle is exciting and fun. But then as soon as they get profiled as thug by white folks or the cops, then there's a problem. As soon as they get caught up in some gang nonsense, then everybody wants to cry foul. But if you don't want to be caught up in it, if you want to be looked like a thug, if you don't want to be profiled as a thug, then you need to separate yourself from them. And I say the same thing to Muslims. Now, it's the Muslim extremists that's causing the problem. Okay? They are the ones who are bombing each other, killing each other over, the Shiite Sunni nonsense that's been going on since Islam existed. But the problem, though, is that how do you distinguish between the good Muslims and the bad Muslims? That's the issue. So I agree that people may have had people were looking at all Muslims in a certain way after 9/11. I can imagine why. But the problem, though, is that the good Muslims never check the bad Muslims. You never hear Muslims standing up against the Muslim extremists. In a lot of cases, they may claim to not be that, but they will support it because they still believe in Islam. Again, that'd be like if I as a black person, as a black male, if I don't check if I don't address the violence that so much violence committed by black males, the fact that, black males are what, 6% of the population, but it's responsible for close to half the murders in America. More than all the violent crimes committed by blacks is going to be committed mostly by males. So if I, as a black male, don't check that, then how can I not expect people to look at me as violent, especially if I'm around here looking like the thugs? I make sure I disassociate myself from the thugs and differentiate myself from those thugs as much as I can. I don't dress like them. I don't go where they go. I don't act like them because I don't want nobody to look at me as a thug. I can't, like I say, not check that ghetto behavior, the thug behavior, the violence, and then look like them, and then get upset because people profile me as that. So we need to see more Muslims stand up and speak against the extremists, the ones who are peaceful, who can peacefully coexist amongst everybody. We need to see more of them speaking up against the Muslim extremists, but they don't, and that's the issue. Now I agree with the bombing in the Middle East, the Iraq War. I agree with that. It shouldn't have. It never should have happened. In hindsight, we're looking later on. In hindsight, all of the people in the Middle East who lost their lives over the lie of weapons of mass destruction. I agree with that 100%. But the thing is though, as Muslims have been killing themselves long before we were bombing them. Because I know people say, well, the reason why they commit these acts is, well, we are bombing them. But they were doing this long before we were bombing them, though. Once again, anyway, if the good Muslims, the peaceful Muslims, were to speak out and protest against the extremists, then they differentiate themselves, and no one will look at them that way. But as it stands right now, people look at Muslims as is the snakes. I don't want to deal with any of them because I don't know who's poisonous and who's deadly and who are not. And I think everybody have every right to do so. Once again, if the peaceful Muslim will start differentiating themselves from the extremists and speaking out against them and protesting, then people will see differently. Anyway, like I said, that's my 2 cents on this. I agree with Candace most of the time, but I disagree with her right here. Yeah, I mean, you have to understand the real nature of Islam. And if you do, then you understand why people fear Islam, because they've always been this way. And if their type of, it's a religious belief that they believe either you convert or die. And it may not hit us at home here in America because we don't live in the Muslim extremist countries, but if we did, you would see it. Anyway, like I said, that's my 2 cents on this. And as always, until next time.